We will be, of course, speaking to Kshira Saagar on the topic of using and measuring the right data to drive your brand's e-com growth. Now, Kshira, is one of the most accomplished men out there. He has a wealth of experience at the very highest level. So I highly suggest you make your next cup of tea within the next 1 minute and 30 seconds so you don't miss this. Before we get into the good stuff, however, a bit of housekeeping first. So there's a poll on your screen right now about how do you measure data internally right now. This is, it's really important that you guys answer this. So it's great to see all of you clicking on the link and answering it. We will be providing presentation links at the end of the summit, so don't worry if we can't get all the information down. So let's get down to the reason we're all here. Kshira. So Kshira Saagar has been with data analytics and decision sciences industry for more than a decade now, having worked across Americas, Asia, Europe, as well as Australia. And the bulk of his work has been focused on developing solutions for the data science and analytics problem spaces of the retail, telecom, and the insurance markets departments at some of the leading Fortune 100 companies in the world. So he was with Iconic in Australia previously, where he was responsible for institutionalizing data-driven analytics across the company's core competencies and growing a two-member data analyst team to a 20-plus strong full-stack data science team. I'm sure our data science guys will be looking at that and going, Christ, how's he doing that? That's fantastic. So, but in his current role at Global Fashion Group as the Director of Data Science, he works closely with the group CEOs and regional CEOs of co-founders to identify, analyze, and optimize key strategic opportunities within buying, planning, marketing, and ops across the region. So this guy is about as good as you get, ladies and gentlemen. So Kshira, good to see you. How are things? How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Matt. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. I'm an hour and a half in, and I'm really flying through it. So I'm in a good place. So we just got the results of the poll just come in, Kshira. So we have, interestingly enough, social media data is one of the elements, or one of the sort of elements that people are monitoring or measuring the most. Does that come as a surprise to you?
Yes, it does, because I think the one big problem with social media data is it's very subjective, and there is, I don't want to invoke the great president of the greatest country in the world, but there's a lot of, you know what I mean, right? So I think while it's good to track that data, if you can peg it and benchmark it against something that you can believe and is more credible, then great. If not, I think it's a good thing to think about where do you peg it with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's a bit of history about Omnilytics. We obviously started in an affiliate marketing space where we monitored what people searched for and then what people bought. And those two data sets were so different. So we were sort of looking at ourselves and going, hang on, if the marketing team is providing feedback for product development and for buying and for designing, they're completely off the mark. I mean completely off the mark, almost zero overlap. So it's very interesting that you say that, but yeah, great. So look, Kshira, we're going to speak about measuring the right sort of data. I'll hand it over to you. I can't wait to hear what you've got.
Cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen. Can you see my screen, Matt?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to talk about how to measure the right data and how you could use it for potential growth. There are two things you should know about me before I start. Typically, two disclaimers from me. One, I talk really, really fast. There's no filter between my mind and my mouth. Somebody once measured how fast I talk in one of the conferences and said I speak 245 words a minute. Second disclaimer, I talk really fast, and that's what I said the first time, so I'm really sorry if you didn't get it the first time. I talk really fast. And the good thing is this video is recorded, so I typically tell people when it's a recorded session, you can play it back at 0.5 and you can still hear me at normal speed. Cool. Because I have a lot of content, so I'm just going to be really fast. Please hit me with questions. Cool. Like Matt said, I'm Kshira Saagar. I'm the head of Group Director of Data Science at GFG. It owns Iconic, Zalora, yada, yada, yada. Cool. So before we start, I'll show you this famous quote. Some of you might know it, some of you might not know it. When it comes to tracking data, there are few things that we think we know, Some things we know that we do not know. But there are so many things that we don't know that we don't know. And that's the mindset I want us to go into the session with. It's not about, yeah, I know all of this. I don't really care about it. I don't want to track it. It's about, I don't actually know what I don't know. And I think let's go into the session with that mindset. And I'll show you why. Cool. So there are 4 sections, very simple. I'm going to take you on a rocket ship journey on what the problem is, why there is a problem, how do you solve this problem, and if you don't care about all of that, at the end of it, what are the 3 things you can take away from this? Cool. So what is a big problem? So it's a big rock. It's a big problem. Cool. So the first big problem is visibility, right? So the best example is COVID. If with COVID going on, if anybody asked you what are the 5 things that are going wrong with your business right now because of COVID, or if you're not doing well, what are the 5 problems? Anybody can tell you customers are not buying more, there is low demand, stocks not selling through, marketing is not working, pricing is not working. I don't think you need to spend $1 million analyzing that problem. Anybody can answer that problem. And if your data provides you answers like that, which are very high level and clunky, it's as good as flying blind. A better visibility would be somebody telling you a particular cohort of customers who are your loyal customers from a particular region and a particular demographic have stopped coming back. A specific set of inventory is not moving at all that you thought would move, and it's not moving at a particular price point, and so on and so forth. Your marketing is not working on these channels, or it's bringing in customers. So basically, idea on exactly what's happening is not there. That's what I call the visibility problem. Nobody knows what's happening across all the regions of the company. Everybody knows what's happening within their department, but nobody can tie marketing to inventory, to tech, to something else. So how do you do that is the first thing. Second problem, even if you did know what the problem was, or even if you were able to figure out what the problem was, the second problem is you can't trust it, right? The credibility of the data is the biggest problem. So when I talk about credibility, I typically I'm reminded of the counting joke. So the counting joke goes like this. There are 2 types of people when it comes to counting. One type of people who know how to count, so that's how the joke goes, right? So you don't know who the second type is because they can't count. Similarly, when it comes to trusting data, there are 2 types of people who can trust data. We do anything with data. One is somebody who knows that it's never going to be correct and still know how to use it. And the second one don't exist for me because these are people who use data not being correct as an excuse to not do anything with it. So can't trust it. So that's the second problem. So again, the first problem is I don't know what's going on. Second problem is I can't trust what I can see. And even if somehow magically in your enterprise, in your organization, you have data that you can see, you know exactly what's happening across the business, you can trust everything that's going on. The third and the final problem is, how do you know that it's the right thing that you're looking at? And the best example, is not going into too much detail, is anecdotally, I can talk about sweatshirts down under here. It's winter, so a lot of sweatshirts have been selling through, and everyone's really happy. Or we've been doing 147% year-on-year growth in sweatshirts, and that's the best we've done. And obviously, 147 by itself is a good number. But when we looked at Omnilytics and other platforms, sweatshirts were selling at like 400 and 500% more. So now 100% looks much smaller than the 405%. So the data that you have that you think you can trust, how do you know it's good or bad? How can you peg it to something else? And that's my point against social media. So that's the problem. The problem is with data, I don't know exactly what's going on across my business. I don't know if I can trust the data that I can see, or even if I can trust and see what's happening. I don't know if it is like the ground truth. So why does the problem exist? I think that's the main question, right? So anybody can say these problems exist. Like people can tell me I'm fat, but nobody can tell me why I'm fat. So why does the problem exist? The problem exists because data is always an afterthought. That's pretty much how I want to summarize it. So if I was given 30 seconds for this particular session, I would say data is an afterthought, and there's one more slide. So basically those are the 2 slides I would potentially present. So what do I mean by that? One, the first problem of visibility, which is why can't I see the top 5 reasons for blah, blah, blah. The answer to that question is typically the mindset of we don't need all of that data. We don't need so much data because not everything needs to be tracked. So how many of you could, if I told some of you that I need to track every single item movement in your inventory, in your warehouse, or if I have to track every single purchase order, addition, revision, even deletion, and if I said things like that, you like, but why? What would you do with it? So the question is never, why not? And it's always about why should we track the data, right? So that mindset always limits what we can track, and it always limits what we can find. Because we track very few things, we can find very few answers. And that's the first problem, which is we don't need so much data. And so all the systems are not tracked. The second problem is the complacency of, we can never get 100%. 100% does not exist. There is no ideal, and people teach us about 100% and what is the ideal scenario and everything else, right? So I think that's not the mindset. I think the mindset is like in any democracy, there's not a 100% leader, but you have checks and balances. You have the executive, the judiciary, and then the third army or whatever, third part of the game. Sorry, I don't know my politics that well. So similarly, in a company, when you track sales, you just can't have one system telling you how much you've sold. You should have multiple systems, and you should have one system that's pegged as the 100%. So for example, if you're an online company, you can't have sales happening in any other way. So the money in the bank is your 100%. So that being your 100%, how do you then work back and see how can I tie back all my numbers to it? So that's how I do it. Or if it's something else, you can have that as a 100%. So there is a 100%, find out that 100% for you, and then work back from that and have multiple systems reporting these numbers. So that's the second thing that I want to talk about. And the third thing is the mindset of inward-looking mindset is because people already believe that they already have the best tools, the best platforms, have the best team, and nobody's denying that. Obviously, you're the best in what you do, but nobody can claim to know what the market is doing or what your competitors are doing. And I think that's very, very important to understand and peg yourselves to the market to see what is happening. And the famous proverb goes, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is the king or the queen. And so that is the problem, right? So if you have your data and you just look within yourselves, you always seem to be doing well, but maybe you're not doing as well as somebody else is doing. So that's very important. Again, we covered why it's wrong, the 3 reasons why it's wrong. 1, the mindset of not needing so much data. 2, the mindset of we can't never get 100% accuracy, so why bother? And the third, the mindset of, we already have everything we do. Cool. So the answer to all of this, the right data that you need to track is everything that you can track. And I might sound like a creepy guy. I'm already wearing a creepy denim jacket, like somebody saying track everything, but track everything that is you can track ethically. So that's pretty much my slide. So this was the other slide I was going to present. Break all the barriers and track everything. And just like in mutual fund documents, you read the offer document carefully before investing. Similarly, everything that is legal and ethical to track, only those things. So, but track everything that you can and are allowed to track and won't harm your customers or won't cause massive data leaks. Track everything else. So what is this everything that I'm talking about is what I'm going to talk about. That's pretty much a summary of what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So like we saw, there are 2 big problems, or 3 big problems, but the 2 of the biggest problems is you don't track everything. And the second big problem is you don't have a check and balance to what you track. Cool. So first, let's see what all you could track potentially, assuming you are a retail store that is selling fashion online or in a store somewhere. So there are 5 things that you can track at a high level. Number 1, you can track everything from a marketing point of view, every single touch point. It could be your emails, opens, clicks, search. What are they searching for? What are the keywords they're clicking on? What does your organic search look like? What is the app push notification somebody's seeing? How often do they visit your stores if you have a store? How many YouTube ads do they watch and how do they watch that ad and what are they doing with it? How much is your GRPs and TRPs and every single thing that you can track, and track them in a way where you can tie it back to a customer at best as you possible. And if not to a customer, at least to a demographic, because that's what you could do with above the line advertising. So track all of that as something you could track. So assuming this is how you talk to the market, the awareness, then they come to your site or come to your store. Then every single click and touch and swipe and push and press of a button on your app, everything needs to be tracked, and we'll see what you could do with something like that. Assuming you can track all of that, track all of that. How much, where are they going in their store? What areas are they watching? What sections of your website are they looking at? How much time do they spend reading a particular product page? And how much time do they spend between a typical purchases? And you look at every single thing. The third thing that you can look at is all the in purchase orders and inventory and everything that's going on. What are the purchase orders that you have, and how many times have you revised the purchase order? What does your master purchase order look like, and how many new additions and deletions and reforecasts have happened on them? Where is your merchandise sitting right now? Where is your inventory right now? How many movements of your inventory has happened? So if I have to track this denim jacket, which aisle was it in on 2 months back? Which aisle is it in now? Which aisle will it be in 2 months later? So track every single moment. Again, trust me on this. I'll show you an example of why you need to track something like that. And obviously, the one that everybody tracks pretty much is every single dollar on every single item. I'd also go to the extent to say track every single returns and rejections and why it's been returned and why it's been rejected. Again, at an item level, at a size level. And finally, and the most important bit that people don't track or people use artificial means is track your customer feedback and how they feel about it, customer satisfaction, NPS, brand perception, referrals, customer voice, every single thing, again, at a customer level. So what can you do with stuff like this? So for example, I'll use the marketing as an example. These are all the data points you can track. So I will not read all of them. You could look at them later. You could do all of them. And what could you do with it? Let's take a potential problem. And there were two really good examples from Sarah and Kendrick. So the problem of low demand. So low demand. So obviously when the demand goes low, the first thing that your CFO or your CEO is going to say is cut marketing. Why do we spend money on marketing? Just cut it. So instead of just cutting marketing, what if I know that this is where my demand is, and I know exactly what channels resonate with which customers at what touch points, and so I can then say, for all my new customers, I'm going to spend marketing. For all my existing customers, I'm going to go heavy on owned channels, so I don't spend any money on marketing. And then you come up with a very smart strategy and know exactly what brands to talk to them about, when to talk to them about it, and how much time should you talk to them about it. So that's something you can do to generate demand artificially. And it's almost like going to your neighbor's house and you know your neighbor very well and talk to them as if you know them. The second thing is you could personalize marketing exposure. And so this is really important, something very close to me. Everybody talks about personalization and hyper-personalization and any other personalization. But the biggest problem with all of that is they only think about their own channel. So you personalize only emails, but you personalize website differently, you personalize ads differently. So a personalized email for me would look very different to when I go to the website, very different to when I get retargeted with an ad. So how do I make sure the whole marketing exposure and the brand exposure for a customer that is me, that can be tracked across multiple platforms, is the same? So that I don't see denim when I get an email. When I go to the website, I don't see any denim because I can find it. And when I get retargeted ads, I get retargeted ads on, say, innerwear and stuff which I never buy from the site. So I want to make sure that the experience is personalized. So that is something you could do if you track all of this data. If you trap every single website click, tag, app purchase, app click, everything that you track on your apps, on your websites, and in your store, what you could potentially do with this is you could nudge your customers. So the example from Sarah on overstocking. So if you have overstock, then on your app or on your desktop, you could nudge your customers if you know them very well and what they like and how they like to see, how they like to browse. You could nudge their journey towards the right product and the right item. So if you have 50 black dresses, how will a customer make a decision? So how do I nudge the customer to the right black dress at the right point in time, which all of them are the same price point, and you bought so much product and everything sitting in your warehouse? How do you nudge them, and how do you give them an experience where they feel like they're not drowning in by filtering or drowning by not able to find something what they need, but for helping them find exactly what they need and showing them exactly what you want to sell. So marry those two together in their purchase journey. So think of them as almost a virtual shop assistant that will follow them through their digital journey and tell them what they should be looking at next. So that's something you could do if you track all of this data. The third one is all the merchandising and inventory. I probably don't have to tell a lot of you about all of this, but two good examples I can think of if you track every single position of the item and all of the stuff is at our warehouses, what we've done is we know exactly when a consignment comes into the warehouse, which aisle does it go in because of how fast it sells, what does it sell with, and exactly when will it sell out, so that we know exactly where to stock that item and how can we pick that item in the most efficient fashion so that people don't spend a lot of time picking, packing, and dispatching that item. And also it's not stored away like in the farthest end of the warehouse where nobody will find it. So even optimizing your operations is really, really important, and you can do that if you can track your item operationally really well. And the most important and the most fundamental thing is replenishing your items. How can you smartly replenish and not just overstock or understock, but replenish at the right size curve, at the right depth, at the right width, and all of the stuff. So you could automate that, and so that you don't have to do this manually again and again. Most of the seasonless stuff, the core stuff, you could automate that because that's going to happen throughout the year, so that you don't have to worry about doing it every single time, and then focus on curating a niche of fashion content that is something that you want to really sell. Again, this is an example of what you could do if you have data on every single purchase dollar spent. I will not go into it, but you can look into it in the slides. And similarly, if you look at all your customer data points on their NPS, their survey, their CSAT, and everything else, you could send out a personalized message to your customer saying, I hear you, I see you, I know what your problem is, and I will fix it. I think that makes a lot of difference to customers. Building a loyal customer base is the most important part about it. So from a customer lens, how do you do everything from a customer lens, and how do you tie your whole business? So for example, at the Iconic, every single department is tied to an NPS score. So you could have operations, you could have marketing, you could have tech, you could have buying. Every single aspect of it is tied to the NPS score, and every single thing we know how much it drives NPS. So if you have bad product, how much will it detract your NPS? If you have bad UX, how much will it detract your NPS? So that we always know what are we doing that will push our customers to be happier and healthier with us. So these are all examples of what you could do. And so when you track all of that, make sure that you can track the same information from multiple sources. So I'll give you one example. You can track your sales from your sales platform. You can also track your sales from your website and app tracking, because that Google Analytics and everything else tracks sales. You can track what is your purchase order and inventory from your purchase order platform. You can also track it from your sales platform. You can track what your customers like from their chat history. You can also track it. So you can track it from multiple places. Make sure you track it from multiple places. And the third and the most important bit is when you track all of them, always see if you can peg it with an external source. For example, one ring won't hurt. So although you have one ring to rule them all, you could have one more extra ring, which could be, say, something like Omnilytics, Nielsen, HomeScan, Euromonitor, and stuff like that. So you have all of these platforms that help you match and verify if what you're looking at is the right thing. So those are the three things that you could do to typically make sure that you're tracking the right thing. So if the last 30 seconds of what you can do with this, one, you can build a dam. So you build a dam, ask for your teams to build a data availability map. What are all the data that we're tracking? So I've given you an example of what all you could track. Do you track all of them? How much do you track them? What all is being tracked? Where are they coming from? Is it worth tracking it? At least build a dam. I call it building a dam, so that you can harness the hydroelectricity from this. Once you build a dam, then find a way to marry off these data sets. Like I said, it's not just about collecting all the data. It's not just about getting excited about collecting all the data, but getting that data and then stitching them all together in a way where all of them feed off each other. So marry off these data sets. So make sure that these data sets are marryable. And again, we can talk more about this later. And the third thing is, don't be shy to get help from outside. So I always tell people that you can have the best tools and best data platforms. Build a dam, make sure you connect them, and then verify them with external data sources. So that's exactly what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. This is my email ID. Sorry, this is my Twitter. This is my website. And this, you can scan this and give me feedback. So please give me feedback. I really love feedback. I know I explored so many things. So thank you so much for the time. And I know Matt's going to kick me off in 10 seconds. Thank you.
I'd never do that to you, Kshira. I'd never do that to you. That was fantastic. I think that this is the kind of content that you're going to have to watch 3 times to get all the relevant information out of it. You know, that's absolutely fantastic. And really appreciate that, Kshira. I think one of the elements that you focused on, which I thought was particularly poignant, was looking internally does not reflect what's happening externally. We can be the best brand in the world, and we've already seen from the example earlier that, you know, Zara was missing out on quite a few opportunities in the white skort space. And Zara, as we all know, has the best market analytics, you know, understanding what's happening socially, politically. They're so in tune. The supply chain is so fast. It's all integrated. But even they miss out on opportunities that the competitors are not. So, you know, that sort of internal data being such a bias versus external data is one of the points I wanted to really highlight from that presentation there. That was brilliant. You know, people really don't know what they don't know. In terms of Q&A, we've got a couple of interesting questions come through, but so one of the questions I want to focus on is, can any sized business measure their data in an effective way? You know, if we're a small business, I'm sure there's a lot of small businesses on the webinar right now. Can they all do this? You know, can they just all dig it in right as they go home tonight?
Yep, and that's a typical example I give, right? So everybody can track all of this data. It could be a one-person store running a boutique. You could still track all of this data. Maybe it's in a spreadsheet somewhere, but you can still track all of this so that you give your customer a holistic experience. And I tell people that maybe when you're on a rocket ship, and the best example is Apollo 13, when you're going up, you probably can put in 10 people into the rocket and then don't worry about what's going to happen. But what happened to Apollo 13, if you know, is it ran out of oxygen halfway through, and then they had to figure out how to get oxygen. So when you're optimizing and a much bigger business, it becomes much more important to track data. And the opposite happens. Startups do data really well. Digital companies do data really well. But the older companies don't do it very well. And those are the ones that really need this data, because they need to be optimizing every single dollar that they can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess the only limitation is the mindset in that case. And from your experience, obviously you've hired fantastically well, and you've grown businesses from you know, being small businesses into real global enterprises. How do you begin educating that data mindset? Where does it start?
I think it starts from the top. So if your executive team, your senior leadership is bought in and they believe that data can make a difference, and every single decision you make in your business is driven by data, or at least an attempt to be driven by data, I think it starts from there. And I also like to think that people need to start thinking about not I used to say that because somebody else used it, but because what fundamental questions it answers for me. And I tell people, if you're trying to answer a question, don't answer it just on yeah. Those are the 3 points I know, but go deeper into it. What exactly is not driving your inventory? What exactly is not driving your customer? So if you ask those finer questions, I think you would need more data for it. And I think it's more about asking tougher questions of your own business. And that's where probably it starts.
Yeah, those tough questions are never easy to swallow, but they can have such an incredible ramification if you do it well. We got a great question here. Sorry,
yeah. So I can just share an anecdote, right? So at the Iconic, when I started, there was a head of menswear, and he came and sat down with us and said, "I have all these questions for you. These are tough. I'll give you 6 months to answer these questions. Go and find the answers for them." And then he gave us questions on who's buying menswear and how many women seem to be buying menswear. Blah, blah, blah. So we tried to answer those questions in half an hour, and said, "These are all the answers that you need. Now ask us more questions." So then he said, "I don't have any more questions." And we tell him, "No, think about tough questions that even you could have never thought you could ask." And I think that's the mindset. People, if you can quickly answer questions and ask people to ask tough questions, I think that's where you can start.
Yeah, that's great. And again, that's talking about that sort of interpersonal relationship you have within companies. How do you hire in the right way? How do you bring those people in that have that transparent feedback and conversational techniques? And I guess that's a lot about things like active listening and speaking to your operations team, your HR team. This is what we need in the business to really create a community or an environment that can grow moving forward. There's another really great question here. Unfortunately, it's from an anonymous attendee. Guys, if you can put your name in there that we can address it so you're being answered. But anyway, because it's such a good question, I will include it. Do you think that customer surveys is one of the most important data sets for us to consider? From your experience, does customer data really, are they really honest with their answers?
Yep, it's a really good question, right? I think standard hypothesis that humans lie always exists, but it's important to understand why they lie. So, for example, I'll give a typical example from our NPS survey. And somebody asked me, what is NPS? NPS is Net Promoter Score. So from the NPS surveys, people typically told us that they were really pissed off with us because of late delivery. And so they said late delivery is the biggest reason they're giving us a lower score. And so if we just took it as without a pinch of salt, then nobody would have done anything with it. But what we did was we took that customer, we looked at their exact order, and we saw if it was late, and it wasn't late. And then we realized that the customer's expectation is that it should be much faster than what they get. And so when we reached out to a smaller focus group and said, "Why do you still feel it's late? It's not actually late." And they said, "No, we think it should not be 2 days, it should be just 1 day." And then we had to educate them about our faster delivery options. And now they understand that they can actually get it much faster if they have different delivery options. So it's a good opportunity to tie back what really happens, which is the output that they've expressed and what they say, and then tie it together and to see why they say what they say and what's driving them. And that gives you a lot of avenues to improvement. So nothing better can happen except from survey data.
No, that's a very prevalent thought. I think that's something that needs to be really considered is how we look at the data, how we measured it, and then what do we do with it internally. I think we've spoken about this previously, but I speak to a good number, maybe 30 to 40 brands a week, and they have all these data sets that they have internally, but like you said, they don't build a dam. They don't know how these sets speak to each other, and they don't know what to take from it. And it's almost like you're just sort of spending money on something that you ultimately can't use, and that's a real shame. Kshira, I really love that presentation. I wish we'd have more time. We could do it again. We will record this, of course, and we will provide links to your presentation. I think that people are going to really take some time to promote that. Fantastic presentation. So we're coming close to our time. Again, we'll be providing the presentation links for everyone. Kshira, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.